India is a lot of things. It's the most populated country on Earth. It's a place full of history, culture, incredible food, and stunning sights. The subcontinent is more diverse than most people can even really begin to understand, with 22 official languages and a vast difference between each and every region of the country. With so much to offer, my own strong desire to see the world outside of America, and one of my best friends in the world living in Mumbai being there to help me plan everything out every step of the way, I decided to take a risk and go on a 10-day trip to India with my mom, which I think is the last place she expected to be going with me, but hey, why not see the world, right? From the crowded streets of Mumbai to the pristine mountains of McLeod and Dharamshala, we did a lot on this trip, so without further ado, let's dive right into it. Traveling from Seattle all the way to Mumbai was daunting to say the least. This was my second vacation out of the country, the last one I documented in my Japan vlog all the way back in 2019, and while that was definitely a long couple of flights, the 16 hours across the Pacific really could not compare to the 10 hours flying over to Paris, which, gotta say, of the many airports I went on this trip, Charles de Gaulle Airport is by far the worst one. But thankfully, I was out of there in a couple hours for a casual 9-hour flight across all of Europe, the Middle East, and on to Mumbai, India, where I arrived at about 1:30 a.m. In total, it was about 23 hours from when the flights started, but if we're including the time it took me to actually get to the airport from my home, it took another couple hours outside. It took over a full day of travel to get to India. My mom's flight arrived just a bit later and we were off to our first hotel. Now, we stayed in Colaba, which is a part of Old Mumbai, an area that's home to a number of gorgeous pieces of architecture like the Gateway of India, CSM Terminus, and the Grand Taj Mahal Hotel, which we'll explore a little bit later. We got a great place though at the Hotel Harborview, which was appropriately in view of the harbor, as in we were right across the road from it, and right down the road from the Gateway of India and the Taj. These two landmarks I'd heard all about before visiting, so it was really cool just to see them right down the road. What wasn't cool though, in a literal sense, was the weather, which wasn't shocking, but there was a heat advisory on our first few days there to make it just a bit more challenging. With over 90-degree weather with humidity to match, going outside was like stepping into a sauna, but thankfully, our first day was mostly spent sleeping after our long flights and meeting my best friend Neha. This trip would have absolutely not been possible without her, so just want to give her another big thank you to Neha for being super awesome. We had some amazing Lebanese food at one of her favorite restaurants called Beirut, which had some of the best hummus I've ever had. Then we went off to see the latest Shah Rukh Khan movie called Jawan, which was wonderfully ridiculous. Jawan is actually out right now on Netflix, so if you want a kinda silly action movie with some really good social messaging, be sure to check this one out. It was good we went light on day one though, because day two was gonna be far more exhausting. In the morning, my mom and I explored Colaba a bit more, and India has a lot of animals just wandering around, from dogs, cows, and monkeys, but I absolutely love these Colaba cats. They were so chill every single time we walked on by, and they're just adorable. After some breakfast though, we headed over to the Cathedral of the Holy Name, which was this beautiful Catholic church where we walked in right at the end of Sunday services. This cathedral was opened in 1905 and is the seat of the Archdiocese of Mumbai, which is not something I really understand because I was raised Mormon, but it was great to walk around and explore, and I especially love the stained glass and high ceilings. With our quick detour complete, we wandered around the market a bit more until we finally met up with my friends Neha and Begrashi, and we planned on taking a quick trip to the Elefante Caves, which is a bunch of caves on a little island in the Mumbai Bay. Inside those caves is a collection of temples to the Hindu god Shiva, but after getting tickets to the ferry, we quickly realized the line was a bit longer than we expected. It basically loosely snaked around the entire courtyard of the Gateway of India, which luckily it moved at a pretty decent pace, and we were only standing for like 30 to 40 minutes, maybe closer to 50. I don't know, time kind of loses you when you're in that heat. Once we got on the boat though, it was about an hour and a half to get across the bay, which was filled with tons of large ships and a big shipping port on the other side of the island. When we got off the boat, we bought tickets to ride this cute little train that would take us part of the way there. Well, that's what I thought was going to happen, at least. In actuality, once we bought the tickets, we walked down the pier to wait for the train to show up, which then ended up with a lot of people shoving to get on board, and I wasn't about to shove a family on vacation out of the way to get on this tiny train, so we decided to just walk. walk. I'm not even sure what the point of buying tickets was since no one was even checking for them, but hey, you live and learn. The path up to the caves was lined on both sides with shops, as well as some dogs, cows, and monkeys just chilling around. After we climbed up the stairs, which was so hot, I cannot stress enough that it was 90-degree weather with about 90% humidity. I am from Seattle. This felt like death. Or like I was living in Texas again, which, again, feels like death. But we made it to the top of the caves, and it was so worth it. It was a bit hard to get some video due to it being pretty overcast, and of course the caves did not have any kind of lighting in them. But it was incredible to see these intricate designs that date back to the 5th or 7th century CE, with many of these statues depicting Shiva in his many different forms. My footage is a bit limited though, due to both the lack of light and a security guard telling people not to film, which I found a bit confusing because the whole temple is documented on Google Maps. I'm going to use the Google Map tour a little as it gives a much clearer view of the main feature of the cave, the Trimurti, which shows a 3-headed version of Shiva. I'm certain I pronounced that wrong. I'm gonna pronounce a lot of things wrong here. I apologize about that ahead of time. After admiring the main cave, we went to see some of the smaller caves, which, while not as grand, are still quite impressive. We were actually looking around one of them when a guard came up to our group and just started speaking to us in Hindi. I had no idea what he was saying because, of course, as I said earlier, my Hindi skills are practically non-existent, but he did ask for a tip after, so of course I tipped him and then just got the gist of what he said later from Neha. Once finished, we walked back down the stairs where stalls were lined with jewelry, Buddhist and Hindu statues, as well as many bootleg Luffy figures. We caught the ferry back to the mainland just as it was starting to rain. And after getting dinner, my mom and I said goodbye to our friends for now, as it was time to leave Mumbai and head up north to the state of Himachal. Don't worry though, we'll be back in Mumbai very soon. But first, a quick little aside just to say, hey, if you didn't know, I've got a merch store over on Fourth Wall, link in the description below, that has some really cool designs that I had commissioned by two of my good friends and fabulous artists, Tiny Ghost and Yog KB. And of course this one, which has a cold heart right over your heart. And who wouldn't want that? We also have hoodies, which are so comfortable. I wear this all the time. I'm not normally a hoodie person, but I wore this my entire way to and from India. It was so comfortable. So go check out the store if you want some cool merch. And you know these shirts are good because I hand delivered a few all the way to India just for Neha. Again, link in the description below, but let's get right back to the video. Now this was the day I was most worried about this entire trip. We went to the Mumbai airport, which I should say was probably the nicest airport we went through. We flew from Mumbai up to Delhi and then went on an adventure to find our bus stop, which took a lot longer than I expected and was incredibly exhausting. Once we found it though, it ended up being at this random ass gas station. From there though, we caught the bus and went on an 11-hour bus ride up north to Himachal Pradesh, which is a northern state in the Indian Himalayas on the border with China. Our goal was to visit Dharamshala and McLeod, which are these twin towns in the mountains full of stunning sights, serene Hindu temples, and Buddhist monasteries. It has one of the world's highest elevation cricket stadiums, and also, for some reason, the Tibetan government in exile. In fact, the Dalai Lama himself was staying just a couple blocks from our hotel. On the bus ride up though, we had a brief stop at whatever this place was. It felt like this was some kind of family fun center type place, though it was like 10 p.m. on a Monday night, so that was a bit more lively than I was expecting. The bus ride though was pretty cheap and fairly comfortable, as I got a good amount of sleep for most of the trip, at least until we got further into the mountains, where it was a bit harder to really rest at all. We stayed at a nice little hotel up in McLeod and had a driver that we had hired for all 3 days, all set up by Neha, who was familiar with the area from her own vacations. Again, MVP of this trip was Neha without question. So after putting all of our stuff away and resting for a bit, we headed out around the area, up and down these tiny roads, which I'm surprised even fit a car, to be honest. Driving around in India was always just a little more stressful than normal, but especially on these winding, narrow roads. Our first stop was this nice little market that had the best wood oven pizza that I've ever had at a restaurant called Trek and Dine. Absolutely delicious. We then went walking around the area just to enjoy all these beautiful sights, running into a small family of goats that were just passing on through. This area was really just so peaceful and a nice change of pace from the comparative chaos that was Mumbai. Getting to spend time just walking around markets and enjoying the scenery would have been enough on its own, but we also made a stop at the Church of St. John in the Wilderness, which was a nice little stone church surrounded by trees. For our last stop of the day, we went to Namgyal Monastery, which is the home of the Dalai Lama. The view here is insane, and it was nice just walking around and observing the monks and people setting up for a lecture. I didn't want to be rude and take too many videos here, but It was nice to just walk around and explore this place. Then it was back to our hotel where we settled in and enjoyed a nice nighttime view of the city. Day 2, we focused more on different places to see, starting off with a trip to some tea gardens where we tried some Bulgarian rose tea. Not really a tea drinker myself, but it was really nice to take a moment and sit and enjoy the sun. Making our way across town, we passed the cricket stadium, which was going to host a match in the Cricket World Cup that, at the time of writing, has now actually ended in a crushing loss for India, with Australia upsetting the hometown team in the finals. Or so I'm told. All I know about cricket is what I learned watching Lagan. Getting past that though, we went to the Kyoto Tantric Monastery Temple, which had a lovely courtyard and yellow dorms surrounding the main yellow building, inside of which was a cardboard cutout of the Dalai Lama for some reason, and behind him, a giant Buddha statue surrounded by a ton of smaller Buddhas. Most of the places we saw this day were Buddhist monasteries, like our next destination, the Norbulinka Institute, which had a large, lush garden filling up the first half of the entire monastery. And it even had a doll museum that was supposed to display what it was like living in Tibet back in the older days. In the main building, there was just one large Buddha vibing there, and a number of wonderful murals displayed all around the room. We then took a drive up a nearby mountain to a great place to hike up and see the massive peaks of the Himalayas. Though unfortunately here, for the most part, the clouds decided not to cooperate with us. But still, it was a nice hike where we could just sit and enjoy the view and get small glimpses of the towering mountains hidden in the clouds. The only thing I would really complain about all of this was the litter. But to be honest, this was kind of a problem all over India and put a bit of a damper on most of the scenic views that we saw. Heading back into town, we got lunch at a wonderful restaurant called the Yellow Llama Cafe, which was a lovely spot to sit, eat some good food, and watch some paragliders jump off a hill across from us. Though, unfortunately, they didn't pick up on camera all that well. After eating, rather than having our driver drive us all the way back up the winding hill to our hotel, we decided to walk a couple blocks to the Skytram, which lets out right beside the Namgyal Monastery that we had visited the day before. This was an incredible ride with a breathtaking view of the city. And as we climbed up, the clouds parted and we got a glimpse of those peaks that had eluded us earlier. We arrived on the other end, and after a brief walk around the market, went to the hotel to rest. All the traveling and sightseeing was starting to take their toll, though we did get a nice night's sleep at least, so there's that. Coming into our last day in Dharamshala before we would head back to Delhi, we went to a couple Hindu temples, all dedicated to Shiva. The first was situated near a fantastic view of a waterfall. The second, we took a long, winding drive up the hill that we had seen yesterday where the paragliders were launching off from. There we found another temple with a great view of the city and the valley below. And last but not least, a more secluded but larger temple next to a river where the people were actually offering us rice and dal. Once we left, we went to our last stop, which was a memorial to those who had lost their lives in some of the recent wars between India and Pakistan. Walking around the garden, we observed the monument lined with names, though it was clearly undergoing some maintenance, including the Eternal Flame, which was notably, not a flame. But it was nice to look around and take in some history of wars that we were quite unfamiliar with outside the broad strokes of the continuing tensions between the two countries. I especially like the large map of India, with each state lined out and colored in with rocks. As it started to get late, we headed back into town and watched the sunset, enjoying the far clearer air of the mountains one last time before we hopped on our bus back to Delhi. Though this bus ride I was far less lucky, as the Tibetan monks that were in front of me put their seats so far back that I couldn't move my knees. It was unpleasant and I didn't sleep that much. Nevertheless though, we did get some sleep, made it back to Delhi, and headed on back to Mumbai. Now at this point I was getting really worn down, so when we got to our hotel room in the mid-afternoon, which was situated right across the street from the Taj, I decided to rest in the comfort of my room for a bit and just savor the AC, getting ready for tomorrow where we had decided to go out to Sanjay Gandhi National Park. This park really does stick out on a map. Mumbai is a crowded city of over 21 million people, and you are reminded of that fact anywhere you go. To the sometimes oppressive smog, to the constant honking of nearly every single car on the road, you feel yourself in the city at all times. But this was a chance to try and get away from all of that. Now, neither of my friends had actually been to the park itself, even though they had lived in Mumbai their entire lives. So this was going to be a new experience for all of us. When Neha and I had been planning it out, we figured we would take the local trains, which I have heard countless nightmare stories of, especially in rush hour, 2 different metro chain lines, and then a quick Uber over to the park entrance. Now that thankfully all went off without a hitch. The local train was nice and empty since it wasn't the main line. And while the first metro train was entirely packed, after a couple of stops it dissipated out pretty quickly. Once we got to the actual park though, we figured we would just take our time and walk the little over 6 kilometers from the entrance of the park to the Kanheri Caves. I go on walks like this all the time. I love walking on bright summer days back home, just going on 6 to 8 kilometer walks with no problem at all. But that was with Seattle weather. This was 91 degrees, 75% humidity, and after we actually went through the entire process of going through the heat to get to this park, when someone offered to just drive us to where we wanted to go, we immediately said yes. This was objectively the correct call as we enjoyed a quick ride up to the caves. But even there, with the sun out and bouncing off the rocks, all of us, including the locals, were really starting to feel the heat. But we still took our time to see the first stretch of these beautiful caves. Kanheri Caves is another collection of cave temples smack dab in the middle of this national park, which is smack dab in the middle of Mumbai. And while you're in the middle of a 21 million person city, this area felt so peaceful in comparison. We took our time to see the first stretch of caves, enjoying the stunning carvings and some massive statues. Cave temples are not something I think I'll ever really get sick of because the amount of skill that had to go into this was absolutely astounding, and the detail that stuck around hundreds of years after this was originally done is amazing. We walked around for as long as we could before heading back to the van. And on the way out, they took us to a small Jain temple where I didn't take any videos because the dudes there were just walking around naked, which shouldn't have been all that surprising because all the statues there were naked too. After exiting the park, we caught an Uber and went to a nearby mall and did a little shopping. And I finally tried Pani Puri and Sev Puri, which were both wonderful. But if you told me I had to pick one, it would absolutely be Pani Puri, hands down. I loved it, and I cannot wait to have it again. The rest of the trip from this point on was dedicated less to sightseeing and more to just spending time together as a group. For a number of reasons, things didn't work out as we had planned. We had some other places we wanted to go, but from a mixture of exhaustion and just other things that had come up, we had to cut back on all that, and instead spent the next day walking around Colaba a little, eating at a restaurant called Pizza by the Bay, which had some amazing pasta, getting some ice cream sandwiches.
What kind did you get?
I also got chocolate, right?
Yeah. Citral, and what did you get?
Chocolate.
Chocolate, good choice.
And then watching people play some cricket in the park before heading back to the Colaba market, which I didn't get a chance to film because I just did not want to do that in a cramped and crowded space. After a few hours, we finally said our goodbyes to Neha and Begrashi, as the following day was a Monday and they both had work that they couldn't really get out of. So on our last day of Mumbai, my mom and I took a look around the lobby of the Taj, which was lined with luxury brands and pictures of all the famous people who'd stayed there before. Then we headed out to Geo World Drive, which is a fancy as hell mall with a 2-story Apple store, a rooftop drive-in movie theater, and a number of expensive brands that I wasn't that interested in, to be honest, but it was crazy to see them all in India. But it was the perfect opportunity to get lunch with Neha, who was able to squeeze in one final meal together. After we took some selfies with her and said our goodbyes, my mom and I spent the day seeing a few more malls before grabbing a quick dinner and heading back to the airport, satisfied with all that we had crammed into such a short few days. We had tried all different kinds of food, saw some truly awe-inspiring temples, and had really only scratched the surface of what India had to offer. With so many more regions to explore, and even in Mumbai, sides to the city that I never got a chance to see, I'm looking forward to the day that I can come back. It was also the first real vacation I'd taken my mom since I was like 15 or 16, maybe even longer than that. And now at the age of 30, being able to take the time to actually spend an extended amount of time with my mom was something that meant a lot to me. I hadn't actually gotten a chance to connect with her in a very, very long time. I want to give a special shout out to both Robbie and Shivam, who were our drivers in Dharamshala. They were amazing and they took us all over wherever we needed to go. Of course, eternal thanks to Neha and Begrashi, who kept us company our entire time in Mumbai and were both just absolutely delightful. Neha especially though was by far and away the MVP of this trip, and this video is of course dedicated to her. Thank you all for watching this video. Normally I cover anime or other related topics on this channel, but I do enjoy traveling whenever I do get the chance and making vlogs about it if I can. So if this was something that you liked, then please let me know because I'd love an excuse to make some more vlogs. If not though, then I'm surprised you watched through the end of this video, but I will be back very soon with some hot new anime takes, so subscribe for that, and I hope you have a great day, a great night, or whatever it is you're having, and stay rad.